Hey listeners, if you haven't already, join the family by subscribing so you never miss another one of these stories. Let's get to 1,000 subs together. Now relax and enjoy. Look, this isn't a story I ever wanted to write down. Some things are better off forgotten, left in the dim corners of your memory where they can hopefully fade. But lately, I get this tightness in my chest when the sun goes down, a kind of dread that settles in long before my shift starts, and I think maybe putting it all on paper will somehow loosen its grip. It started with the night shift at Walmart. Not the supercenter you're picturing, all bright lights and cheerful greeters, but a smaller, older one on the edge of town. A place that seemed to huddle against the darkness rather than push it back. I took the job out of desperation, pure and simple. The rent was due, and the day jobs weren't calling back. The manager, a tired-looking man named Bill with a permanent coffee stain on his shirt, hired me on the spot. He didn't smile when he offered me the position, just looked at me with a kind of weary resignation and slid a single sheet of paper across his desk. "This is for the overnight stalker role," he said, his voice flat. "You'll be working 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., alone for the most part after the cleaners leave around midnight. There are rules. Read them. Memorize them. Don't ignore them." I almost laughed. Rules for stacking soup cans and arranging toilet paper. But the look on his face stopped me. It was dead serious. I took the paper. It was typed, the font small and cramped, like someone had tried to fit as much as possible onto the page. I figured it was just standard corporate nonsense, stuff about break times and safety procedures. I was wrong. The first few rules were normal enough. Rule 1. Your shift starts at 10 p.m. precisely. Do not enter the building before this time. Rule 2. Upon entry, proceed directly to the time clock. Do not look toward the garden center doors on your way. If you hear whispering from that direction, do not acknowledge it. Simply clock in. My eyes scanned down the list, the normalcy quickly evaporating. Rule 5. The intercom system is for management use only. If the intercom crackles to life and a voice that is not mine gives an instruction, you are to disregard it completely. Do not, under any circumstances, follow instructions given by the intercom after midnight. Rule 7. The automatic doors at the front of the store will sometimes open on their own. This is normal. If you see a person standing outside in the parking lot, staring at the doors as they open, do not approach them. Turn around and walk to the back of the store. Wait 5 minutes by the dairy cooler before returning. Rule 10. You will hear a child crying in the toy aisle, specifically aisle 7. You are never to investigate this sound. If the crying follows you, move to the sporting goods aisle and focus on counting the fishing rods until it stops. The list went on. 15 rules in total, each one more bizarre than the last. It talked about shadows that moved against the grain of the lights, about price tags that would change to read 1 cent, about a specific can of beans in aisle 3 that was never to be rotated or sold. The final rule, Rule 15, was the most unsettling. It stated, if at any point you feel an overwhelming sense of being watched from the freezers and you hear a sound like dry leaves rustling, you are to immediately cease all activity. Close your eyes. Count to 30, slowly. When you open them, everything should be normal. If it is not, if you see a man in a blue vest who is not an employee, leave the store immediately. Do not run. Walk calmly to your car and go home. Do not return. I looked up from the paper, a nervous smile playing on my lips. Was this some kind of hazing ritual? A joke for the new guy? Bill was watching me, his expression unreadable. "It's not a joke," he said, as if reading my mind. "Every rule on that page is there for a reason. Follow them, and your nights will be quiet. Break them, and, well, just don't break them." The first night was unnerving. The store was a different world after closing. The lights were dimmed to a sickly yellow, casting long, distorted shadows down the aisles. The constant hum of the freezers was the only sound, a low drone that seemed to vibrate in your bones. I stuck to the rules like a Bible. When the intercom hissed and a soft, feminine voice that was definitely not Bill's whispered "stock the meat," I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I ignored it, my hands trembling as I forced myself to continue unpacking boxes of cereal. Around 2 in the morning, I heard the crying. It was faint at first, a distant, pathetic sound coming from the direction of the toys. It sounded so real, so genuinely upset, that every instinct screamed at me to go check. But Rule 10 echoed in my head. I stayed put, gripping a box of cornflakes so hard the cardboard crumpled. The crying grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was right behind me. I forced myself to walk, not run, to sporting goods. I stood there in the dark aisle, surrounded by silent baseball bats and coolers, and counted the fishing rods. 1, 2, 3. The crying faded, swallowed by the humming silence. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The rules worked. For a few weeks, it was manageable. Unsettling, but manageable. I learned the rhythms of the strange night. The way the shadows would sometimes pool a little too deeply at the end of aisle 13, home and decor. The occasional, inexplicable chill that would sweep through the store, even though the thermostat never changed. I saw the man in the parking lot once, a tall, thin figure just standing there, motionless, as the doors slid open and closed for no reason. I didn't approach. I walked calmly to the dairy cooler, my heart hammering against my ribs, and stared at the gallons of milk until enough time had passed. It was on a Tuesday, about a month in, that things started to shift. The routine had made me complacent. I was stocking the pet food aisle, my mind numb from the monotony, when I realized I had broken a rule. A small one, but a rule nonetheless. Rule 4. Always face the aisle when stocking shelves. Never turn your back to the open space for more than a few seconds. I had been crouched down, sliding bags of dog food onto the bottom shelf, my back to the main thoroughfare for a good 5 minutes. I stood up quickly, a prickling sensation on my neck. The store was silent, same as always. But the air felt heavier, thicker. I shook it off, blaming my own paranoia. That's when I noticed the price tags. Every single tag on the bags of dog food I had just stocked now read 1 cent. The little paper labels, which had been normal seconds before, were unmistakably changed. A cold dread washed over me. I took a step back, my eyes darting up and down the aisle. Nothing. Just the long, yellow-lit corridor of products. I decided to take my break early, retreating to the designated break room in the back, a small windowless room that smelled of stale microwave popcorn. I sat there, trying to calm my nerves, telling myself it was a prank, a glitch in the system. But the rules were specific about the 1 cent tags. It was a sign. When I went back out, the store felt different. The silence was no longer empty, it was watchful. I kept seeing movement out of the corner of my eye, quick shifts in the shadows that stopped the moment I turned to look. I tried to stick to the rules even more carefully, but it was as if the store itself was testing me. The intercom came on again, the same soft female voice. "The man in the parking lot needs your help. Please go to the entrance." I clenched my fists, ignoring it. A few minutes later, the crying started again, but this time it was different. It wasn't coming from the toy aisle. It was moving. It sounded like it was coming from the next aisle over, then the one after that, circling me. I broke into a cold sweat. Rule 10 said to go to sporting goods, but the crying was between me and there. I felt trapped. Then I heard the rustling. It was a faint, scraping sound, like bundles of twigs being dragged across the linoleum floor. It was coming from the direction of the freezers, and with it came that feeling, the one described in Rule 15, a crushing, undeniable sensation of being observed by something ancient and hungry. I froze. My mind went blank with panic. The rules? What were the rules? Rule 15. Close your eyes. Count to 30. It seemed like the most insane thing I could possibly do. To shut my eyes in that moment, with the rustling getting louder and the feeling of a presence bearing down on me, was a terrifying prospect. But I had nothing else. I squeezed my eyes shut. 1, 2, 3. The counting was a lifeline. I focused on the numbers, blocking out everything else. The rustling sound seemed to swell, filling my ears. I could feel a cold draft washing over me, carrying a smell like damp earth and old paper. 21, 22, 23. I thought I heard a soft, rhythmic clicking, like teeth chattering together. 28, 29, 30. I opened my eyes. The store was quiet. The oppressive feeling was gone. The rustling had stopped. I almost collapsed with relief, leaning against a shelf of canned vegetables. It worked. It actually worked. I let out a shaky laugh, feeling foolish but immensely grateful. And then I saw him. Down at the far end of the aisle, near the freezers, stood a man. He was wearing a blue vest, the same kind the employees wore. But he wasn't one of us. His back was to me, and he was perfectly still. My blood ran cold. Rule 15 was clear. If you see a man in a blue vest who is not an employee, leave the store immediately. Do not run. Walk calmly. I turned and began to walk, forcing my legs to move at a normal pace. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me to sprint for the door. I could feel his presence behind me, a cold spot in the store. I didn't look back. I walked past the registers, past the empty shopping carts, my eyes fixed on the glass doors and the dark parking lot beyond. As I pushed the door open, I risked a glance over my shoulder. The man was still there, at the end of the aisle, but he had turned around. I couldn't make out his features in the dim light, just a pale, blurry oval where his face should be. He was raising one arm, pointing down the aisle he was in, as if directing me to something. I didn't wait to see what. I walked to my car, got in, and drove home, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. The next day, I called Bill. I told him what happened, that I had seen the man in the blue vest. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, he sighed. You followed the rule. That's good. Take the night off. Come back tomorrow. I was too scared to go back, but I was also too broke to quit. The next night, I returned to the store, my stomach in knots. Bill was waiting for me inside. He looked older than I remembered. We need to talk, he said, leading me to his office. He didn't mince words. That thing you saw, it's been here longer than I have. The rules are the only thing that keeps it contained, for lack of a better word. Sometimes, when a rule is broken, even a small one, it gets a little stronger, a little more real. He explained that the store was built on a patch of land that had a history, a bad one. Things had happened there, old things, and the building acted like a magnet for that kind of energy. The rules were a system, a way of navigating the store's peculiarities without attracting unwanted attention. The man in the blue vest was a warning, a sign that the balance had been upset. You have a choice, Bill said. You can walk away now, and I won't blame you. Or you can stay. But if you stay, you have to understand this isn't just a job anymore. It's a responsibility. The rules aren't suggestions. They're the only thing keeping the doors closed at night. I wish I could say I was brave, that I stayed out of some sense of duty. But the truth is, I needed the money. And a strange part of me was now morbidly curious. I stayed. The next few months were a lesson in hypervigilance. I became a machine of obedience, following the rules with a religious fervor. The strange occurrences continued, but the rules always guided me through. I learned to sense the shifts in the store's atmosphere, to recognize the subtle signs that something was about to happen. It became a grim, unsettling routine. The turning point came when Bill called in sick. It was the first time he'd ever missed a night. He sounded terrible on the phone, his voice raspy and weak. "You'll be alone tonight," he said. "Just you. Be careful. And whatever you do, do not go into the basement." I had never even known the store had a basement. The rule sheet didn't mention it. That night, the store felt more hostile than ever. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence more menacing. I worked quickly, trying to keep my mind occupied. Around 3 a.m., the intercom crackled. This time, it was Bill's voice, but it was wrong. It was strained, gurgling, like he was trying to talk through water. "Help me. I'm in the basement." I dropped the box I was holding. That wasn't a Bill. It couldn't be. The real Bill was at home sick. This was the intercom rule, Rule 5, in action. I tried to ignore it, but the voice came again, more desperate. "Please, it's dark down here." I fell. I can't get up. Then the crying started, not from the toy aisle, but from the general direction of the back rooms, near where I assumed the basement door was. It was joined by the rustling sound, louder and more aggressive than I'd ever heard it. The lights in the store flickered, and for a split second, they died completely, plunging me into an absolute, suffocating blackness. When they came back on, everything was wrong. The store was rearranged. The aisles were in a different order. The signs were wrong. That was the first thing that truly broke me. The simple, impossible wrongness of it all. The big hanging sign that should have read grocery now had letters that swam before my eyes, spelling out something that looked like gristle in a jagged, unfamiliar font. The arrow pointing to electronics was bent at an unnatural angle, aiming straight down at the floor. The world hadn't just gone dark, it had been rewritten, and the new text was a language of panic. And standing at the end of my aisle was the man in the blue vest. He was closer this time, so much closer than in the parking lot, close enough that the dim overhead lights didn't just hint at his features, but carved them out in sharp, terrible detail. His face was long and gaunt, with skin the color of old newspaper, the kind that started to yellow and become brittle at the edges. It looked less like skin and more like a sheet of parchment stretched taut over a frame of unexpected angles. His eyes were dark, empty pits, not like black holes, but like something that had been scooped out, leaving behind a profound absence that seemed to pull at the very light around them. His mouth was stretched into a rictus grin, far too wide for his face, a gash that split his lower face from cheek to cheek, but there was no joy in it, no malice even, just a fixed, mechanical expression of a smile that had been imposed upon him. He pointed, not down the aisle as he had before, but directly at a door I had never seen before, a heavy, metal door set into the wall between the pharmacy and the restrooms, a door that felt like it had always been there, waiting to be noticed. The basement. Every rule I had ever learned, every warning from Bill, every instinct for self-preservation I possessed screamed at me in a unified chorus to run, to turn my back on this nightmare and leave the store and never, ever look back. But a new, terrifying thought entered my mind, a thought seated by that fake, gurgling voice on the intercom. What if that really was Bill? What if the thing in the store wasn't confined to these fluorescent-lit walls? What if it had tendrils that reached out, into the town, into homes, and it had somehow gotten to him while he was sick and vulnerable, and he was really down there, hurt and bleeding out on some cold concrete floor? The man in the vest kept pointing, his grin widening infinitesimally, a subtle crack forming in the parchment-like skin at the corner of his mouth. The rustling sound was deafening now, no longer a single source, but a symphony of dry scraping coming from all around, from above the ceiling tiles, from under the floor, from inside the shelves themselves. It was the sound of a forest of dead trees being dragged across stone. The crying was no longer a child's sob. It had escalated into a shrill, panicked wail that clawed at my eardrums, a sound of pure, undiluted terror that echoed from every direction at once. I knew, with a certainty that felt like a physical weight in my stomach, that this was a trap. I knew that stepping toward that door was breaking every single rule, that it was exactly what it wanted, that I was being led to the slaughter like an animal through a chute. But the human part of me, the part that had been raised to help, the part that remembered Bill's tired eyes and his stern warning that this was a responsibility, that part was warning with a primal, survival part. The human part won, fueled by a desperate, foolish hope that I could still be a hero in a story that had no room for them. I took a step forward. The linoleum felt sticky under my shoe, like it was coated with a thin film of syrup. Then another. The air grew thicker with each step, harder to breathe, carrying that scent of damp earth and old paper so strongly it coated the back of my throat. The man in the vest watched me, his head tilting to the side with a slight, unnatural jerk, like a bird considering a worm. His pointing finger remained unwavering, a single accusatory rod aimed at the metal door. I walked toward it, my heart pounding so hard and fast, I thought it would simply seize up and stop. The sound of my own blood rushing in my ears mixed with the rustling and the wailing, creating a cacophony of dread. The door grew larger as I approached, and I saw it was pitted with rust, stained with dark, indistinct marks around the handle. It was cold to the touch, even through my work gloves, a deep, seeping cold that felt ancient. I reached for the handle, a simple, brushed steel lever. My fingers, trembling violently, brushed against the cold metal. I never made it any further. As my skin made contact, the store lights died again, but this time it was different. This wasn't a flicker or a temporary failure. This was a final, absolute extinction. The blackness was total, a suffocating velvet blanket that swallowed all light, all shape, all sense of up or down. The rustling sound didn't just surround me, it became me. It was inside my head, inside my chest, a vibration that shook my teeth and bones. The crying wail cut off abruptly, leaving only the overwhelming scraping. And then I felt it. A dry, brittle hand closing around my wrist. It wasn't cold, like I expected from some ghostly presence, but unnaturally, unsettlingly warm, like sun-baked stone in the desert, holding onto the heat of a day long past. The grip was firm, not crushing, but absolute, and with it came a wave of static, a million whispered voices all talking at once. A library of forgotten thoughts poured directly into my mind. And then, cutting through the static, a voice, not from the intercom, but from right next to my ear. A voice that was both a whisper and a roar, devoid of gender or age, whispered a single word that carried the weight of finality. Mine. The word wasn't a claim of ownership. It was a statement of fact, as undeniable as gravity. I was already there. The rules, the job, the slow breaking of my caution. It had all been a process of cataloging, of shelving. I wrenched my arm away with a strength I didn't know I had. The brittle warmth clung to my skin for a moment before releasing, and I heard a faint, crinkling sound like old paper tearing. I ran. I didn't walk calmly. I had abandoned all pretense of rule following and ran blindly through the absolute darkness, my arms flailing in front of me. I bounced off shelves, sending boxes and products crashing to the floor. I stumbled over something soft and something hard, my ankles twisting, pain shooting up my legs, but the adrenaline refused to let me fall. Behind me, I could hear things moving, not just the rustling but distinct shuffling footsteps. Slow and deliberate, and a faster, skittering scraping, like something with too many legs scrambling across the linoleum. The crying started again, but now it was a chorus, coming from multiple points, and it was getting closer. I had no sense of direction, no idea where the front of the store was. The geometry of the place had been undone. I just ran, hoping against hope that I was moving away from the basement door. Then I saw it, a sliver of gray light, a stark and beautiful contrast to the perfect blackness. It was the thin vertical line of the emergency exit door over by the receiving bay, its battery-powered sign a beacon of salvation. I changed course, lunging toward it, my breath coming in ragged, sobbing gasps. I didn't slow down. I hit the bar with my whole body weight, the loud, metallic clang, a shocking noise in the oppressive silence. The door burst open, and I stumbled out into the cool, clean night air, falling to my knees on the rough asphalt of the loading dock. I didn't look back. I scrambled to my feet and ran to my car, fumbling with the keys, my vision blurred with tears of panic. I locked the doors the second I was inside and sped out of the parking lot, not caring about stop signs or speed limits until I was miles away, surrounded by the normal, sleeping houses of my neighborhood. I never went back. I called Bill the next day to quit, to warn him, to something, but the number was disconnected, a flat, empty tone that felt like an epitaph. I drove by the store later that week, my hands gripping the steering wheel. There was a new sign out front, a bright yellow going out of business sale banner that looked obscenely cheerful. Within a month, the building was empty, a hollow shell waiting for a wrecking ball. Sometimes I drive past it now, and I can almost convince myself it was just a bad dream, a stress-induced hallucination from a terrible job. But then I look down at my wrist. There's no mark, no scar, but sometimes, when I'm tired or the light is just right, I imagine I can still feel a faint, dry warmth there, a phantom imprint of that grass. I know that whatever was in there isn't gone. It's just waiting. The building is empty, but the land is not. The rules weren't just for our safety. They were its instructions, a manual for how to interact with its temporary occupants. And once you started breaking them, you moved from being a visitor to being part of the inventory, an item to be collected and stored away in the dark, silent aisles of whatever that thing called home. I never found out what happened to Bill. I like to think he moved away, started fresh somewhere else, that he saw the signs sooner than I did, and got out clean. But in my darker moments, when I wake up in a cold sweat from dreams of rustling, and that wide, papery grin, I know the truth. The store got him. He became another rule in a manual no one will ever read again. And it almost got me too. The only rule that matters now is the one I made for myself. Never, ever go back.